I am Todd Vinson. Welcome to Base Camp Wisdom, a podcast with people who weathered the storms, traveled the hard miles, and made it to the other side. In this podcast, we're going to explore life lessons, valuable insights, proven tools and experiences that will help guide you on your own leadership journey. So grab your cup of coffee, sit back and listen to some seasoned Sherpas who've not just weathered the storms, but they've made it to the other side. Welcome to Base Camp Wisdom. Todd here on our next episode of Base Camp Wisdom with my buddy Jake Phelps. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Todd. How about yourself?
Good. I saw a coffee cup in your hand. So what are you drinking this morning?
So I'm usually an Americano guy. So I'm just it's really just whatever clarity is slinging over there. So it's always top notch.
They do great work. Which one do you go to?
I'm really grateful. They recently opened the one off 13th and Hudson, I believe, over there, just on north side of Midtown. It's easy in and out. It's a great little spot because my shop's off 19th, so it's a little easier for me to kind of like loop through. So that's been kind of my shop. But since they opened, and that's been fairly recent, I think the past like 30 to 60 days they opened that up.
Oh, well, you and I have been having conversations for at least 15 years, if not 20.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a little backstory on Jake. What's some fact that folks don't know about you?
Yeah, man.
And let me start out by doing a proper job of introducing you. You're the owner of Capital City Barber, right in Midtown on Classen. And our buddy Grant Hill is the one who introduced you to me, even when I was back at the Boys Ranch out in Chandler and I was driving into Oklahoma City every month.
And so I was born and raised in kind of Tulsa area and moved down to the OKC metro. Probably I was 17, 18. And so I went to school. I met my wife really young, like most good Oklahoma boys, we get married really young. So I was married by 20. I met her when I was 17.
I thought you were going to say 13. So, man, you were old.
Yeah, exactly. When we met, we both knew we wanted to, I kind of thought I was going to be in more of like social work kind of arena, specifically within homelessness. And as was when I met my wife, that was something she was also interested in. She actively works in that. She was able to get her MSW over the past, 15, 18 years. She works at Homeless Alliance. But as I was moving into that space, it just it wasn't really clicking, and it just didn't feel right. So I think eventually I just had to have like an honest conversation with myself around, is like, this is something that I think is like noble and good and what I want to aim towards. But at the same time, like I'm pretty, I don't say severe because I'm pretty, I run my own business, but like I have ADHD to the point where it's like, sometimes I can't read more than probably 5 or 6 pages at a time. And so just like formal education was always kind of a challenge for me. And kind of had to come into a space of like, oh yeah, that's okay that I'm not that, but then I had to kind of like look into myself and be like, well, what do I like and what do I enjoy? So it's funny, I started waiting tables and I'd never been in forward facing customer service like that. And a lot of people think about waiting tables as like hell, you know what I mean? Or like they would hate it, or it's like kind of a job that, you do if, for whatever reason, because you didn't go to college or whatever, but I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And so then kind of knew I didn't want to be in a restaurant forever. The pace of that is a little more fast and furious than what
it
I
is.
knew I eventually wanted. I wanted kids and things like that. And you can do that. But I have clients and friends that have kids and families and own restaurants. But in my early 20s, I was like, and so I never in a million years thought I would be doing hair. It was kind of the thing. I was not going to college. I was waiting tables. I was like, I'm going to try this out and just kind of see where it goes, and try to be open towards it, and really kind of fell in love with it, in a way that, and I wrestled with it up until probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I'm 38. I might do this and then go do something else or, but really I'm sitting at 38 and it's like, man, I genuinely love what I do. It scratches all my itches in a way and I can provide for my family. And so, yeah, so I feel really, really lucky and grateful that I found something that I genuinely like going into work,
And what
and
makes
so,
capital cities different than other places across Oklahoma City?
yeah, I do think because I was really idealistic in my early 20s around ideas of like, well, like what is community and being known? And because we do live in an environment that is so hyper individualized that it's sometimes people don't even realize that being known is it's a beautiful thing to like watch customers walk in and we can say their name and be like, hey, John, we got you down with so and so today, and kind of trying to capture that, but not in a way that feels salesy or anything like that. So over the years, we've really kind of settled into like the clients that really enjoy interacting with us, we really enjoy interacting with them, and pretty quickly we can identify like if somebody walks in, like we had a guy walk in, really young guy, probably early 20s, he walked in, he had a suit. You could tell he had put a lot of effort into looking good that day. And he walked in and he he was just a walk-in customer. That process tends to be, hey, do you have an appointment today? And he immediately like kind of clammed up and just like turned around and walked out. And so for whatever reason, we didn't meet that guy's expectation.
Mhm.
And that's fine. You know what I mean? Because, I think part of being known is like living in that awkwardness with the customer or with those around you. I oftentimes think about, I guess, what makes us different here.
I didn't know that you had an itch to be community minded and work with homeless. I've been coming for probably close to 20 years, and I would say that you've got a pretty good pulse on the community. And I think that's probably that's one of my draws. I'm living in Norman now, but there is a sense of connection. It's just like a coffee shop. I mean, you are known.
Mm-hmm.
They do know you. I think that's a standout, is that people do want to be known. And you're very forward facing in your atmosphere at Capital City. And I see
And
that community is important to you.
yeah, oh, it absolutely is, and it's also a beautiful thing because people who choose to work with me at Capital City, those are the ones that like I encourage. Find a client that you are clicking with, if that process is easy, and it's give and take, right? Like we have to do our part of like making sure that we're running on time, offering good services, communicating well. At the same time, there are customers that walk in that like, this is hard, like this feels like there's more tension here. So really trying to encourage my team and my staff to really like, hey, it's okay if that guy was kind of an ass a little bit, like he's probably not going to be in your chair long term,
And there's something
and
else going
so
on in his life that has nothing to do with you.
exactly. And so also I think there's an element of sitting in non-judgment with people and really just trying to like connect with them for where they're at. There is a thing that like, it does feel like there's a lot of men seem to be really lonely right now. There seems to be kind of sort of like there's a thing happening in culture where people are really, really isolated. And so it's really beautiful to watch, to see people come into the shop and to like just to get to another barber. It sounds silly, but it's like, man, I think if people chose to commit and live in the awkwardness and live in the like, oh, I'm just going to get to know you, it does feel like everything in our culture encourages us to be hyper isolated or to be hyper individualized. We are defined by our opinions. And if you don't align with my opinion, then like I don't have to deal with you. Our media sources, all the algorithms, they concentrate on us very specifically. um there's an idea that I love, and it's this idea that we're saved together but we go to hell alone. And so some of that, when you're sitting down with somebody who might have really really different political ideas or even religious ideas, that there's some beauty in like working through that with that person in a way that's non-confrontational. But
That's
that what
rare
that takes
these days.
it's really really rare. So our general clientele is very diverse.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
people all over the political spectrum, all over the religious spectrum, people who have very radical ideas around like either gender identity to political identity to whatever it is. And I do think it does take a sense of posturing of humility. It kind of forces you to question your own presuppositions about people around you.
We're quick to judge, aren't we?
Yeah, we are really, really quick to judge. I love the question, like, who is my neighbor and who is my enemy? And a lot of times, I think a lot of the voices in culture create these abstract enemies that, like, oh, well, this group is doing this to destroy this institution or whatever it is in culture. But then when you really like sit down and talk to that person, it's kind of like, oh, you're not trying to like burn the thing down, but you're just trying to like work through your own issues or whatever. And so sitting with people with a little more empathy, try to instill that in my staff. It's like, hey, like, just because somebody said something that is offensive to you, why is that so offensive to you? And then really take like question your own assumption on it, and but still have value. Still have values, and all of those things that you need to function as a human. Not that we are just like blowing around in the cultural wind.
What's amazing, though, is that, you've got an opportunity to have a point of contact with someone 10 or 10 to 12 times a year. And that ends up being a rhythm and an anchor point. Man, if we don't have any roots, I was listening to a devotion from Lectio 365 today. And the whole message was, if you don't have any roots, you're not going to produce any fruit. The culture we're in, and certainly post-COVID, so much of our rhythms got disrupted. And me coming in once a month as an anchor point with you, we have pretty deep conversations, and I'm coming to see you because I need something. I need a haircut, but I walk out with so much more than just a haircut. We have a chance to connect. We say that in this day and age, say, yeah, I've known that person 15, 20 years, and we've got difference and beliefs and views and preferences. But man, I walk away every time I come in with more than a haircut. I felt encouraged. I felt heard, like I belong to that community. I'm not as cool and hipster with good hair and good beards and good ink as some people that come in there, but you guys make me feel a whole lot better about myself, and I walk out feeling a whole lot cooler than I really am. I just want to share with you that you guys provide so much more than maybe what people think that they're getting when they come in, but I would call that a differentiator for you guys. For me, being in the coffee business in the past, before I started doing coaching, really the coffee's just the platform. It's just the hook. And I mean, I'd love to ask you to share a little bit about your faith and how you use this. I mean, you've taken that platform to really have big impact on your community. And how does that get rooted out in your own faith journey?
Yeah, so I think I went through a big journey in my early 20s, and we ended up kind of in these more like Eastern Orthodox circles. There's a lot of really goodness of just like really practical things that like allow me to synthesize reality that I've learned through the church in the East. And one of those is seeing God in your neighbor. Like when you sit down with somebody and it's tied to ideas around incarnation, ideas around iconography. There's tons of writings on it, but it's like an embodiment of the thing. And so again, we're safe together. We go to hell alone. And a lot of the ideas that I think I wrestle with on a really deep level, and which this is actually, I don't really talk about this stuff out loud. So this is kind of and I've been trying to intentional to not talk about this stuff out loud. Just there's a lot of people that talk about community and wanting to build community, but then like when you really kind of see behind it a little, there's weird stuff tied to it that makes me feel uncomfortable.
Well, I asked the question so you can be unfiltered and share your thoughts here.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's tied to like seeing God in my neighbor, or really whoever walks in the door, and
Your Norman neighbor.
Like, yeah, exactly. So that this might kind of sound a little bit kind of paradoxical, but like we are not our thoughts, but at the same time, our thoughts determine our lives. And so it's where do we put our energy and where do we put our focus? And if you're always focused on media outlets, news outlets, political outlets, those things tend to draw a lot of anxiety and discontentment. I want to speak really generally here because this is, these are experiences I've had with customers. There was a guy in my chair within the past, 90 days where he's really, really successful by all the standards. He's been able to build an insanely successful business. It's multi-regional. He has, a really nice watch. He's got the right car. He lives in the right neighborhood. He has all of the things that society tells him that he needs.
Checks all those boxes.
He checks all the boxes, but he can't even sit alone with his thoughts. In fact, he, like when he's in the chair, he's constantly cruising his cell phone, and I can see what he's looking at. You know what I mean? I can see, but it's like he's not even doing anything. He's just like kind of like re-clicking his email. You know what I mean? Seeing if anything came through, or he'll jump to Instagram. You know what I mean? And so there's like a that doesn't seem like he's at peace.
Yeah. That's the word that I'm
so,
thinking about while you're talking. Doesn't feel like there's a lot of peace there.
There's not a lot of peace in that. And so
a lot of stimulation, but not a lot of peace.
Right. And a lot of distraction, and so.
Yeah, distraction's probably the better word.
And I think, we live in a really distracted world. And so to sit with people in non-judgment, in humility, and try to really embody that, and forgiveness, or whatever it is, whatever those things that we aim at, like, it feels more like a superpower, like in a way where that people are drawn to it. And so if you can be like a healing presence and know yourself and learn, look inward a little bit more and be like, oh, well, because it's really easy to like hyper reason out all these things. You can say like, oh yeah, like I believe this, like it tells me I need to do this, I do this, I do this. And you're hyper reasoned, but then there's no embodiment, or there's nothing that calls you to like really calling into change. Or it would be like, I would say it's like the process of theosis, of like.
It's like you just given me a religious checklist. It's really not any different than the checklist you just mentioned with the guy in your chair. What makes it attractive is seeing Christ in you and coming out of you and the way you live your life, which I think is where you were going there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially to where one of the biggest things for me was being present with my children. Like if you can, I was really torn up on some stuff one time, and I went and talked to my priest, and he kind of said, hey, don't, it was really funny. He said, how did he word it? He said, I was really offended about something that someone said or whatever. And he was like, hey, like, don't worry about that. Go play with your kids. And I was like, okay, like, cool. Like that doesn't really help me. You know what I mean? In any way. But then I took the advice and I tried to embody it and try to do the thing. And I remember it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh my God, like if I can be present with my children, like that means I'm not distracted, and really being present and dealing with reality and dealing with suffering and dealing with, when you can deal with yourself, and then there's this thing of, you can assume the responsibility of those around you, to where you can help them process through things and deal with things, and in a way that's more of a guide, you know what I mean? And it's not like it's not this like preachy thing, because I definitely don't like the idea of like proselytizing, or it just never felt comfortable for me. I mean, I don't know why, but I've always kind of been like that.
But you have a relationship with your priest, so he came alongside you. He's with you.
Right. Yeah, I'm known in that way. You know what I mean? Like, like there are things that we process together that is, that I think is insanely helpful, because it is like, there's a lot of people giving bad advice out there, and especially to young men, they're being told that masculinity is aesthetic. We saw that with, especially, and I'm going to talk about this from like a hair standpoint, but, we saw that in, the past 15 years, there was this like really hyper masculine aesthetic that came in vogue. But really, I think a lot of men chase that and realize that like, oh, I'm still this, you know what I mean? Like this has not solved any of my problems. I have the right boots and the right, you know what I mean? And all these things, but,
I still have 100 problems, but my hair is not one of them.
Right. Exactly. Like I'm still so anxious that I can't even I can barely figure this out myself, or I'm so anxious, or I'm so living in the future. Anxiety is future thinking. And then depression is like living in the past.
Looking backwards.
And yeah, looking backwards. Right. So part of that process is, I think it just comes back to working on yourself, doing really simple things really well. You know what I mean? Like keeping daily prayer rule, trying to fast, you know what I mean? At whatever capacity,
that word 2 or 3 times, just about having a guide. And
yeah.
Man, the guide doesn't just shoot you instructions and wish you the best. That guide comes alongside you. You said the word superpower a minute ago, and you and I I would sit in there for an hour and a half, but you'd charge me double for my haircut because I've taken up a slot. But you and I actually have deep, meaningful conversations, and we talk about the Lord. We talk about how God is at work. We talk about the things that we struggle with. We have some pretty authentic conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Just spitballing, how many other guys do you have similar conversations with throughout your week that are along those levels? When you mentioned you just see an epidemic sense of loneliness and isolation. Do you have other guys that come in and have similar type conversations with you in the chair?
Absolutely. Like there's definitely the longer people are in my chair, the more we have those conversations. You know, like the things I'm as a professional, the things I'm not really encouraged to talk about are religion and politics, but the only things that I kind of want to talk about are religion and politics.
Religion and politics, yeah.
Yeah, and so and really at whatever capacity, like I love having conversations with folks who are who don't have or who aren't interacting with faith in any kind of capacity. And a lot of times it does feel like it's the conversation is one and the same, but like we're all trying to deal with the suffering and reality of the world, and how to handle it. And so, yeah, like I would say, like there are lots of conversations that I have that are really meaningful that like I don't know if they're getting those anywhere else. So it does feel like it feels fragile in that, like, because people are so isolated, and I don't even think we realize how isolated we are at this point to where we're at in this, progression that is society. But so, yeah, I would say I have a lot, but then I also have, I have long-term clients that we generally just like talk about the weather.
What's the superpower that you feel like God's given you that makes those things happen?
Again, I think it is through my experience within the Orthodox Church and the guidance in which I've been given through that has allowed me, you just start seeing stuff in a little bit different way. Half of it doesn't matter. They might try to get a rise out of me or whatever, but then if you just like sit with that in non-judgment and like let them rant, kind of like you said, like being heard. You know what I mean? Like everyone's talking, but nobody's heard. And so if you can figure out, and it takes work. Like that's the thing. It's like, there's this idea of the holy mountain, and to climb the holy mountain. You've climbed a mountain. You know what I mean? It's not easy. And there's points of stress, and you have bruising, and there's scarring, and your lungs hurt, and, there's all these things. And so it's kind of like, I don't think the society tells us to check out. It's not the full picture of what reality could be. And so, in fact, it's like really isolating. So you see men are interacting with pornography at alarming rates in a way that like they can't even talk to women. Just do what you want. You are your own, like kind of the Lone Ranger kind of mentality,
Yeah. Yeah.
That like I am my own guide. I think of it as like a hyper reasoned anarchist to where everybody, it makes sense in your head. Like there are depths of intimacy and love and friendship that are available to us as humans that I don't see playing out in certain circles that say, if you do this, then like this will make you happy, or this will liberate you, or this will whatever.
Because we've settled for a cheap substitute.
Right. Yeah. And I don't even know if it's settled or but I think it's like sometimes people, they just don't know. We can only walk with the light that we hold.
They don't know there's an upgrade.
If you don't know, you don't know. And so again, like coming back to this, like sitting with people in non-judgment to where if somebody doesn't know and they've been guided and they've been like given instruction that like this will liberate you, this will make you happy, this will be fulfilling, and you go all in on that. I mean, this kind of comes into like identity, and I'm not trying to make a hardline political statement, and not because I don't have beliefs, but at the same time, like neither of those paths I think are going to lead to something good. So like trying to see beyond that, and seeing beyond that, like, oh, I think there is something better behind what they're selling.
Yeah. Well, and as you're talking, and I obviously like the mountain metaphor, and there's mountains that I've seen the summit, and there's some mountains that won and I did not. But is there a pivotal moment in your own life that was one of those mile markers that really shaped or formed you, that really changed the course of your life because of that experience?
Yeah.
It's made you the person that you are today?
Yeah. Like I had a mentor who at some point was kind of softly trying to convince me that I'm probably wanting to divorce my wife. And I was young and I was naive and all these things, but I remember being in that moment and thinking to myself, like, well, this isn't like I actually love my wife and I want to be in a long-term relationship. Where it was like, oh, I need to trust myself a little more.
Well, they bring you as a challenge, or is it more of a temptation?
I would say that that person wasn't a safe person. So I think it felt more of like a temptation, maybe. But like that person was clouded, or it was, presented as this like this is good advice.
Yeah. So it's important on who we select as our guides. So it's really important
Yeah.
who we choose. I wrote about that this morning in a post. It's really important who we rope up with as we go down that journey, because good advice and good judgment, good character will lead you to places you want to go and keep you safe. But the opposite of that is true. If it's bad advice and there's enough of it, it'll pull all of you off.
Right.
And you all can be a fatality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so again, I think like knowing your values, knowing where it's a lot of this feels like a values conversation. It's like, well, what are these things that I'm choosing to commit myself to, and then where am I putting my energy, and then where am I focusing my thoughts? And if and it would be really easy. And again, when I heard that, I remember thinking to myself like, oh, like, that's not really a value of mine. It's something I would want to resist, and was able to come out of it, and had to learn how to like create boundaries with people in that way. That was really important for me, which kind of prepped me for other things, I think. And then I had another pretty pivotal moment. We had this kind of speaks to the loneliness epidemic. During COVID, it was intense for everybody. It was hard for all of us. And I think if you say it wasn't, then I don't think you're living. I think you're delusional. And, I had an employee who ended up, he ended up dying during that time. And it was this really pivotal moment to where it was like the severity of what we were experiencing within the culture. He felt like there was no way out. No way out. And
felt pretty hopeless.
Yeah, it was like really hopeless and kind of nihilistic and all these things. And so I think, through that process, I learned a lot. I had better boundaries, I think, coming out of that. I had, at the same time, when you go through that and you see somebody who you're kind of trying to mentor and see that they're making enough money behind the chair, that their customers are coming back, you're trying to help guide them in a certain way. It really kind of like opened my eyes a little bit more it's this like isolation epidemic. But also being in community doesn't also mean that you're going to just like always agree. It's good to kind of fuss with people a little bit, to be like, like, that guy said what? Like, that guy's an idiot. You know what I mean? But then also to come back to it and be able to have a conversation about it. I've got a really good friend of mine. He, we definitely don't have the same political leanings. But over and it's taken me a long time, I would say years, to really come to a place where I really enjoy hanging out with the guy.
I'm glad for you to finally say that about me now. It makes me feel a lot better.
And so
it took 20 years, didn't it?
So there is a thing, like, it takes time. We live in gratification culture, and it's self-serving. It is just this like living in a hyper isolated state that like I'm right about everything. My opinion is right. Everyone else is wrong. Nobody knows what they're talking about. And
is my identity based on me being right, or is my identity rooted in something so much deeper, and it be rooted in who I am in Christ and who God says I am, not based on what I think and what I feel about any certain topic? So
much of my journey into orthodoxy was not about being right. And everything up until that had told me you're right about stuff because you believe this. And this is more of a theological conversation around this idea of sola scriptura and some of the like ideas within the Reformation and the unintended consequences of that. I do think we live in a culture of hyper isolation. And, there's a thing with sola scriptura. There's a dynamic where you can't get past interpreter. So if you are always interacting with this stuff in a not in community, you know what I mean? You tend to be right about everything. And it's really easy to be like, oh, well, that guy's wrong because he reads it like this. And so then I don't have to deal with that. So I'm going to go find someone who justifies me. And so then God's just going to judge us by our opinions. And then that doesn't feel this doesn't feel like this thing that I have to submit myself to, but then everybody around me has to submit to my opinion. And that doesn't feel like a posturing of humility. And so a lot of me coming into orthodoxy was letting go of a lot of that stuff and be like, oh, I don't know. Actually, I don't have any kind of hardline theological training, or really, I was young, so I didn't have a lot of life experience, and so, but also being in an environment where there were men who were older than me who would model humility and model mercy in a way that I hadn't seen before, in a way that was really disturbing and disorienting. I had this really intense experience. A good friend of mine, his mom had MS, and he was the primary caretaker. And I watched him take care of her through his 20s. And, again, society would say, you need to be working, but he chose the path of suffering and denied himself. And said, okay, I'm going to do this, and like that would be another pretty intense moment for me. I mean, I remember during college, we would go to the nursing home and we would eat lunch with her, and she's bound in a chair. And so you're eating like nursing home food, which I would just kind of push it around the plate because it just it would gag me. I mean, it was pretty not good. My preferences and my own ego, and had to let go of my preferences in that moment. But then in that moment, I was able to see a lot of beauty and a lot of selflessness that was radical in a way that and it felt extreme, but at the same time, he was able to be present with his mom, even in the suffering.
That's good.
And it's like, okay. And that really, I would actually say that moment and that experience with him, it still affects me and haunts me today. And haunts me in a way that not is well, I guess, yeah, because it's this idea of working out our salvation in fear and trembling. It's holy smokes, who am I? You know what I mean? It questions all these things in a way that I think is good and helpful for the soul and ourselves. But again, I was never exposed to any of that stuff. And so the hyper reasoned side of the faith, it wasn't leading me into that. It was it was telling me I was right. It was telling me I was right, and we're doing it right, and this is how it's supposed to be done. Just because we read it and think it's just kind of our opinion towards the thing, opposed to submitting myself to something. And there are even tenets within orthodoxy that I'm still wrestling I wrestle with. There's stuff that I've learned to accept and deal with, but again, I think that's good for me. It feels like more of a denial of self in a way that I wasn't seeing in other faith circles.
This is your journey that God's got you on, and you said you're pushing 40s?
Yeah, I'm 38. Yeah.
So the things that you've experienced and learned, we talked about some of that here this morning. What's something that you would share to a guy maybe in his 20s and 30s that's just starting out that you would have loved for someone to shared with you when you were in that same phase of life?
Yeah, be known. A place where you are known, where you have friends that you can have hard conversations with. And if you can't have or say things out loud without somebody making fun of you or kind of dismissing it, then you need to find a circle that, is challenging in that way.
You might be in the wrong circle, right?
Yeah, totally. And I went through that. I had to find kind of the camp that, was workable for me. Also, you're not right about everything. You know what I mean? It takes humility to say I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, and when you can approach life in that way, it's just it's deeper. Your relationships become deeper, I think. And I think we're seeing the ramifications of that. At the same time, I think the aim is off in that, it is not your monetary, your personal value is not tied to how much money you generate, or it's not tied to how much you contribute to your team. It's being able to be humble and embody peace and love and mercy and selflessness. Show me somebody who's truly selfless. And it's again, that's a disorienting thing in a culture that tells you to serve yourself.
God gives us a totally
Sorry
different
if that was a little
measuring
ramble.
stick. No. I mean, God
Well,
gives
yeah.
us, it's counterculture of the measuring stick that he measures. And so do I have a kingdom mindset? And am I looking at kingdom statements as opposed to income statements? And those are totally different. So,
Mhm.
so what I heard you say is, be known. And you've also discovered what your non-negotiables are.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are those things in your life, and how does God give you those convictions?
And like trying to be in a space where you can like, it's good to sit in silence. You know what I
We
mean?
don't do that
Like
very
it's,
well as a culture.
we don't, sometimes I even think about like not playing music at the shop.
Mhm.
Like in a way that's like, and it messes with people. Like I say, sometimes the music, people can't sit with their own thoughts. So aim towards a life that is selfless, that you can deal with yourself, to know yourself and to know how you respond in certain environments I think is a good thing. But it's a hard path. If you climb a mountain, it's not easy. And if it's not challenging you, if there's no pushback, like the fuss of community, some like dealing with, people.
Yeah.
Like that's a
Resistance is
good
where the
thing.
growth happens.
Yeah,
Whether it's
absolutely.
resistance training or even pushback in relationships. And so
Yeah.
we're not good at being still and quiet. We're not good at being known and being authentic. And so we see the effects of that all the time.
Yeah.
Go a little deeper. So
Mm-hmm.
if people wanted to get in touch with you or connect with you, what's the best way to do that? Is it through Capital City?
Yeah.
How do you like to be connected with?
Yeah. Yeah. Like really through the shop, like if you want to get to know me, like because I've got 2 kids and I'm married and, in the business and things like that. So I'm always accepting new customers. At the same time, I mean, if you'd ever want to get a cup of coffee and just talk about life or whatever, I'm always happy to. Yeah. With enough notice, I can always kind of make that stuff work.
What's your favorite coffee shop and what you order when you go?
Yeah.
Is that different from what you told me early on when we first started this conversation?
It's, I love Steve and Chelsea over at Clarity. I think it's been really fun to get to know them over the years. Both of them they've been in my chair for 10 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to get to talk with them about like and really just like sharing the suffering of owning a Main Street business. You know what I mean? Like it's not glamorous, there are easier ways to make money. At the same time, they've chosen to commit to Oklahoma City in a way and to really level up, I think, the customer service experience in Oklahoma City, to see them come online, find their voice, find a hyper-focused niche that I think they're killing it at, all in on Clarity.
That's awesome. Well, that's awesome.
I'm definitely an Americano guy, but like their washed Ethiopian is always insane.
Yeah. That's fun.
I never go more than a cortado, but like sometimes I'll go Americano cortado if I'm hanging out for a little bit, but
that's awesome.
It's consistent. It's great. Steve models a lot of the things, and I don't even know if he knows this, but like they generally model the values in which that like I think are good. It's fun to see it play out in a way that feels like if I was to own a coffee shop, I would want it to be like Clarity.
Well, that speaks volumes, and I'll flip that around on you as well. You do community really well on the public-facing side, and so as the guy in your chair, I would say the same thing. If I had a barber shop, the vibe, the way you live intentionally and pour into people is why I keep coming back. I just want to thank you for hopping on here today. I know you're about to go back in the shop, and thanks for sharing your story and sharing some wisdom with some guys that hopefully will help them on their own journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Todd, it's always good catching up. So it's always good talking to you. So.
All right. Hey, we'll talk to you here soon.